Alright, so I have dragged this out for long enough. Today we're going to be talking about the Dune Part 1 movie, and I'm going to tell you exactly how I feel about it. I am very, very pleased with a lot of things. There are a few things that I kind of want to touch on that I'm hoping that they flush out in the next part, and I'm really, really excited to see where this is going. So, just off the bat, a couple of things that I really, really loved. The banter between Duncan Idaho and Paul Atreides. I think those two actors played really well off of each other on screen. There were a couple of comedic moments, and I thought that they worked really, really well. Now, the interesting thing, and I will warn you, there are some spoilers going to be in this video here. If you haven't seen the first part, please, please, please watch it before watching the rest of this video. If you're not worried about spoilers, go ahead and continue on. I'm just going to do a little bit of rambling, but you'll see in just a moment exactly what I'm talking about, because there are a few things I'm going to touch on that are obviously going to ruin the movie for you if you haven't seen it yet. So, the first one is Duncan Idaho. He's one of the main characters. In fact, arguably, Duncan Idaho is the main character of all of the Dune books, because technically he is the only character that is in all of the Dune books. Now, that's kind of a misnomer, because most of the time these are replicas or Golas of Duncan Idaho, but he is the only Gola in known history to recover his memories of his former life, and it happens to him ridiculously often in God Emperor of Dune. Paul's son Leto starts to become the sandworm and becomes the eternal God Emperor of Dune, and becomes a worm, basically. And over the course of his life, which spans a long, long time, he looks for companionship. He can't find friends, nobody trusts him, so he keeps reintroducing the Gola of Duncan Idaho, and every time he does, the Gola figures out who he was and realizes that Leto must be the one that killed him. So it's just this endless cycle of him being reborn, discovering who he is, discovering he's going to die, getting killed, and then being reborn again. He kind of gets the shaft really, really bad, poor Duncan. That being said, I brought this up because the Gola storyline has major implications for what happens to Duncan in this first video. So, technically, in the other versions, they assume Duncan is dead until later on, and then he actually dies. In this version, it seems that he did actually die, as Paul saw in his vision, because he sees him in that hallway and tells him, if I'd have been there, you would have lived. Only the thing is, Paul is technically right there. He's not very far off and still can't save him. He's pretty much locked behind a locked door, and Duncan sacrifices himself. But I will say that because of the Gola structure, it is possible, not possible, it is almost guaranteed that we'll see Duncan Idaho again. Maybe not in one of the next two films. I'm betting that he will show back up, but definitely if they continue down the road past the third of this series, he'll definitely be back. So, like I said, the most interesting thing about that character is you could argue he is the main character of Dune because he is the only one that is in all of the books. That said, we'll move on from Duncan Idaho. I loved Jason Momoa's portrayal. I thought it was very, very spot on. I think he is a very, very stoic person, and I think that translates very, very well to Duncan Idaho. There were a couple other performances I thought were really, really well. Gurney Halleck, oh man, when he talks about the Harkonnen being animals and being beasts, he just feels it, man, and it's deep. There were a lot of really deep cuts in this movie that, if you're not invested in the overall story and you kind of don't know what's going on, those things might just seem like irrational emotional outbursts to you. But when you consider the overall arc, the tone, and the basic premise of where things are headed, they all really, really make sense. And in the overall picture of things, I think a couple of scenes in this movie are going to come back into perspective down the road once we get some other perspective on those particular scenes. One in particular is towards the end of the movie. Paul and Jessica are trapped in that tent, and he is starting to kind of lose his mind. There is a couple moments where it's almost like Rand from the Wheel of Time, where the pressure gets to him, the fact that he's forced into this and he doesn't have a choice. He doesn't see a way around it or a way out of it, and all he can see is destruction. And that is the very, very quintessential trope that is assigned to the chosen one. Basically, if there is no threat of them not being able to fulfill their destiny, there is no plot, there is no drama, there's no action. So this was a very, very, very emotional and well done portrayal by Timothée Chalamet. I really, really liked that scene. There was a second where a part of me got angry that it seemed like he was being really whiny and that he was blaming Jessica for a lot of things. But by the end of the scene, everything he had said had put it into perspective and made me realize that no, Paul really would be upset at this point. His father just died. Their whole family pretty much just crashed and burned, and he's alone in the desert and doesn't know what to do. He knows that his mom is pregnant, and he knows that he's going to have a little sister. Unfortunately, Leto never gets to meet her, and she doesn't even get the chance to tell Leto that she's pregnant. So, very, very spoiler heavy. Hopefully, they get someone really cool to play Arlia. The girl that played her in the last one was epic. Sorry about that. The wife was calling, you know. She calls, you got to answer. Anyway, where was I? We were talking about how emotional Paul can be in this movie and how I think that there are some very, very interesting lead-ins for the next movies. One of the interesting things that I'm not angry about or displeased about, and I totally understand why they did this way, and actually, cinematically, it makes a lot of sense, but there is no Fade Rautha, so he has to show up in the next one, otherwise there won't be a final conflict where he fights him for the Emperor's daughter's hand. So, Fade, I'm curious to see who they get to play him. The Beast Raban, man, that guy was made for that role. I'm not a big fan of Drax in the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. I'm sorry, don't hate on me. I just think it is the dumbest character ever. I don't think he's funny. I don't think he's a good actor. I think he's just kind of blah. But as Raban, props, dude. He did an amazing job. And he just kind of got that brooding, quiet, slightly dumb, no offense. I mean, I know he's acting, but that's how Raban is played, as just a emotional beast. He's always angry and quick to be ill-tempered and not really very smart. Baron always has to explain to him what's going on. So, yeah. Obviously, Raban is a... what is the word I'm looking for? Not a red herring. There's another term for it. I can't think of it right now. Basically, it's a kind of they're using him to suppress the planet. That way the other cousin can come in and be like the hero and save him and make him look good and everything. So, MacGuffin? Is that the word? Something like that. Anyway, Raban, I was really pleased with. The Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, there are some scenes where you see him. It is very, very slight. The cinematography in those scenes is fantastic. There is a scene where he rises up and talks about how Arrakis belongs to him, and you see him with the suspensor belt and he's floating, and that is the first time you really get a full shot of the Baron. Phenomenal, phenomenal scene. There's also a scene where he's like in a sauna or something, and he's talking, and all you see is his hand on his face, and he does it. It's just brilliant, brilliant, brilliant acting on Skarsgård's part, for sure, for sure. It was an epic, epic, epic role, and very hard to fill. The other two people I've seen play Baron Harkonnen kind of did it with a little bit of whimsy and almost comical attributes to it, because he is so over-the-top evil. Not this time. This guy is very, very dark. It is deep. I'm very, very interested to see if we can get some more backstory on the Baron, because you don't normally do that, but there is a reason he uses those suspensor lifts. He has a disease that kind of makes him grow these weird bulbous growths, and that's why he's so misshapen as well. He's not just fat and lazy. He is fat and lazy, for sure, but he's not just fat and lazy. Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty much a good summary of my reaction to how I feel about the first part. Oh man, Oscar Isaac was an amazing Leto Atreides. This is a very, very well acted film. Didn't get to see too much of Zendaya, so I'm not too sure how I feel about her in the role of Chani yet, but That is obviously a very important role, and they've already said that in the next movie she's going to be taking a more front and center, central role to the story, which I guess makes sense. Although I don't understand why, if you were going to pick a female character when the whole book is basically told from Irulan's perspective, recalling the history of Muad'Dib. I think that narrator thing that they did in the other movies, where it was her reading, is definitely overdone. I'm glad that they skipped that this time, but I'm also slightly disappointed that you haven't seen Irulan yet, because none of these stories would be told if it wasn't for her. So she's kind of necessary for the development of the story, and in order for the plot to work beyond the third movie, she has to be there, because if he doesn't marry the Emperor's daughter, he doesn't become the Emperor. It's just kind of it's a paradox, a time loop. So Irulan's going to show up, just like Fade's going to show up. Hopefully they get somebody better than Sting to play him in this version. I haven't looked to see if they've cast him yet. I haven't even looked too far into what they've got. I know that they're filming part 2 right now, so I would assume that they have at least an actor selected or the field narrowed down. But looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to part 2 mostly because of the Fremen. You should see his transformation into the full-fledged Muad'Dib and actually get to see him become the Kwisatz Haderach. And I'm very curious to see, when they take the Water of Life, how they do the visuals of him experiencing all of the past lives and everything that's going on all at once. So, beautiful movie. Very, very cinematographic? Cinematic. Let's go with that. Very, very great visuals, great sound effects, great all the way through. You got the Hunter-Seeker. There's a little bit of a change in there. I liked the fact that Jessica selected Mapes by basically the fact that she spoke the old tongue, and that she pretty much dismissed everybody that she didn't feel was a threat, and then befriended the person that she felt was a threat, and it turns out that person was actually... You gotta watch the scene. It's difficult to understand. Also, the hand signals that she uses with Paul. That is a Bene Gesserit thing, and she technically has taught Paul a lot of Bene Gesserit ways. But using those hand signals around other women, especially the handmaidens and things like that, you're not really keeping anything secret from them. So when she's flashing hand signals to her guard, telling her not to attack, that's not really an overt signal to her guard. What that is her showing Mapes basically that, hey, I hold these secrets. I don't need to say something to have something done. It's a very, very powerful thing, and it literally is a gesture. Interesting. Very, very interesting power dynamics in this show. And that's what it's all about, isn't it? It's all about politics and power, and how absolute power corrupts absolutely. A lot of people assume that this is the hero's journey, and if you read this story from beginning to end, it is not the hero's journey, okay? This is the classic example of how any hero who lives long enough will see himself become the villain, and Paul is afraid of this his whole life. He knows it's coming, and in the end, he eventually walks out into the desert because he doesn't want anything to do with the atrocities committed in his name. So, very dark, very tortured person. And his son ends up getting it even worse. So, like I said, this is pretty spoiler heavy. I'm looking forward to part 2. If you have any comments, questions, or anything that you noticed that I didn't touch on or that you want to talk about, please leave them in the comments down below. Don't forget to ring that notification bell so you get notified when we post new videos. And be sure to hit the subscribe button. I'm going to be posting a synopsis on the Wheel of Time series. I'm actually doing 2 of my own series on each episode. There will be a What Just Happened and a What the Hell. So What Just Happened is basically going to be a synapse of the last episode before you watch the next one, and will be pretty spoiler heavy. What the Hell will also contain spoilers, because it's going to be some of the differences between the books and the TV show, and me asking what the hell did they do this for. So if you're interested in that, make sure you hit the subscribe button. I'll have the first What Just Happened up today. We'll be covering the first episode, and then I should be posting on the next couple episodes before they come out. So that's going to be it for this one, guys. Technivorous out, and we will see you in the next one.